We'll start off, I guess, got to push continue here. Okay, we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to call the roll. Sherry Ackrey is not present. Thor Ackrey is present. Dan Davin is not present. John Edwards is present. Tom Haley is present. Cynthia J is present. Mike is present. Dave Perry is present. Joe Schramm is not present. And I am present. We have a quorum. Starting with the agenda. Item 4, approval of minutes for 2/25/21, which was the site visit, and 3/20/21, which was the school visit. Has everybody had a chance to read through it?
Mr. Chair, I'll motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Okay, soon we'll have unanimous consent. All right. Any objections? No further conversation. Motion carries. Okay. All right. Discussion, vote on account 3330 SRO. It's page 16 in the budget. This is the school resource officer. I believe the number was what, 62,000?
3330.
Page 16 in our budget book. I might be looking at an older copy here. So this would be the match. The town makes, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, that, yeah, 62,000. It's even on the current copy.
Make a motion to approve 62,000. Resource officer.
Second.
All right. Do we have unanimous consent on this? No objections? Motion carries. All right, we have the superintendent and our chair of our school committee, and we are ready for your presentation, sir.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight to present to you the school department request for our FY22 budget. I'd like to recognize other members of the school department and the school committee who are on the call this evening. Amy Roderick, who's the director of finance. Amy Donnelly Roach, who's the principal at Fort Barton, also does a lot of assistant superintendent work for us. Dr. Larkin, chair of the school committee, and Ms. Farnsworth, also a member of the school committee, is with us. I think Mr. Dakotas is there too. And I would suspect there are others watching on the other venue. So again, there's a lot of us here this evening. I'm going to give you provide a presentation, but everyone's here then to answer any questions that you may have. So this time I'm going to share my screen and bring up a PowerPoint to sort of guide the information we'd like you to have.
Dr. Sanquioni, I need to make a point of order here. We are not posted as an official meeting. Is it possible for one of us to actually watch on YouTube?
Mike Dakota's just left, Dr. Larkin.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, and this is, by the way, this is our meeting too, so it is technically a public meeting.
No, but we're not posted, and we would have a quorum present if we had 3 people here. So it would become a meeting of our body. That's the problem. Not so much that you guys aren't posted.
I would disagree, because again, if anybody here is testifying from your board in front of the budget committee, it would be no different than if we were at the town hall. You wouldn't post to go and present in front of us in town hall.
Yes, we would.
We would.
No.
And have. So we didn't post because we weren't sure, we didn't think we'd have a quorum. So
Well, there you
yeah,
go.
if we discuss school business and have a quorum present, we're violating the open meetings. So is there Joe, is there a link or a YouTube stream that someone could watch? Because they're more than welcome to watch as members of the public.
It's live on Tivertonvideos right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, videos.
All right. So I'm going to let Dr. Sanchioni continue and just let Mr. Dakotas know that he can watch on live on video.
Great, thanks, Dr. Locke. And before I bring the presentation up, I'm hopeful that members of the Budget Committee were able to obtain the budget book we left for all of you. So all that information in that budget book is the supporting details behind the presentation this evening. Your handy resource for you. Okay. Okay, so I think you have that and you have the presentation up. So I'm going to take you through it. Again, pleasure to present to you the FY22 budget request from the school department. And a couple questions we try to answer as we brought this presentation to you this evening is, does Tiverton want a school system that provides a good education for its students? And I want to emphasize good, because as I take you through that, you're going to realize that that's what we're trying to provide here, just a good, solid education. It's not a budget request or an education that has a lot of extra things to it. It's based upon delivering a good education for our students. And certainly what you folks always have to think about is what's right for the residents of Tiverton. And certainly having a high quality school system, one that provides a great education, is in the best interest of our residents. Also, as we know, it's a huge driver of property values. For you to understand our FY22 request, it's important to take a look at where we are this year, our FY21 budget, the one that's supporting the school system right now. And here you're going to see some numbers. You're familiar with them from last year. Our operating budget, and I'll use round numbers, 33.2 million, is comprised of 4 distinct funding. The local contribution that we received last year, and that was up $1 from the previous year. Our increase was really generated on state aid and the school committee's decision to use Medicaid funds and fund balance funds. And the reason why I have the 1,075,000 in red at the bottom, that totals the 2 numbers above. That is one-time revenue. And so to balance our, not even to balance our budget, but to get to the 33.2 that we're currently operating on this year, the school committee again used 2 revenue sources that were one time. And that's an important part for you to understand, because even though using $1 million in one-time revenue, these 24 positions were cut from the Tiverton Public Schools. So we had these positions last year. We are operating this year without these 24 positions, plus those other 3 positions that are not what we call full-time equivalents, but really stipended positions. So I want you to take a good look at this list, because this is not the same education we provided last year, this year. There is an impact for every one of these positions. We had our principals on, each one of them could talk to you about what the impact was at the high school, at the middle school, and our 3 elementary schools. We're not providing the same quality education. So again, we cut, here's a key point here, we cut 24.2 positions and used $1 million in one-time revenue. So as we go into the FY22 budget, as we're formulating our budget for this year, the school committee made the decision to bring in a level service budget. And so the definition of a level service budget, no new staff or programs, simply moving everything that we have this year ahead 1 year, meeting all of our contractual obligations. So this is not bringing back any of the 24.2 positions we cut. And to do that, that requires $33.9 million. So that's the key budget number that we want people to understand. At $33.9 million, we continue to do what we do this year and don't add any extra programs, no curriculum, no extra PD, no technology, nothing else. Just stay in status quo and still down 24 positions. So let's try to understand that $33.9 million request. The school committee voted a budget of $32.5 million. And the reason that took place is because legally, that is the largest increase they could ask for. However, everyone is supportive of the 33.9. And for understanding then, certainly the delta between the 33.9 and the 32.5 is almost 1.5 million. And so one of the things that's important as you have our budget book, and I continue this presentation, you cannot find $1.5 million in cuts in our budget. We literally could not open the public schools next year. And unlike last year, where the school committee had one-time revenue to fill that gap, I'm showing you our fund balance is at zero and our Medicaid is at $75,000. So there are not the same revenue streams that were available in the past. This budget gap, this structural deficit that's been in place for many years, eventually has to be closed. And if it could be closed, if it could just get closed one time, then budget requests in the future would be much more reasonable. They would be at 1%, 2%, 3%, just basically the cost of living. But this gap has been there for so long, and it's one of those things that has to be closed. So we're always trying to play catch up. One of the things we were asked is, what about the revenue you're receiving from the federal government? And so I want to show a couple sources that we're aware of right now. The top three are revenue sources that we use for COVID mitigation. We're using those funds this year. So $265,978. And then we have another grant coming to us that we're currently aware of. We know there's other sources out there that could be coming to us, but there's one that we're aware of right now. And that's $763,000. The important thing to remember about that dollar amount is three things. We know we're receiving it. We do not know the restrictions on that money yet. The guidance hasn't been given to us. And thirdly, it's one-time revenue. So if it was used as an operating offset, we would just be back another year with the same structural deficit and facing the same problem. And I just want to share this with you. You know, one of the successes the schools have had this year is we're one of the few districts in Rhode Island that were open full-time K-12 at the end of September for all of our students, and have remained open all the entire school year, educating our students. And the reason we were able to do that and mitigate COVID and protect people is because we really invested in our schools. And you can see here in this chart what that top number there, that $550,969 was used for. And I'm going to bring you back a slide and show you that we received $265,978 to offset this expense, yet we spent over $500,000. And so again, our budget took a pretty significant hit, but it was well worth it because again, we're able to provide a high quality education for our students every day in school, K through 12. Going back to the $33.9 million request, as you see in the budget books we provided you, our budget is divided into two categories, salary and expenses. So the first category, salaries, you can see here the number of people we employ in each category. And again, this is down 24 positions from the previous year. So just to bring everyone back that we currently employ would be again, I'll round the numbers off, 17.5 million out of the 33.9. So that would be 51.7% of our budget. We'd like to bring back everyone we have. Again, we took a significant cut last year in personnel. The other part of our budget is expenses, and the expenses is 16.4 million out of the 33.9. And you can see the increase from the previous year and the percent increase. And I want to break that 16 million down for you. So the four main drivers of that $16 million are listed here: benefits, special education, transportation, energy. So benefits are contractually mandated. We can't cut that. Special education is a federal program. We cannot cut that. Transportation is state required. We cannot cut that. And certainly energy is self-evident. We have to have the lights on, the heat on in our buildings. So if you look at our expenses, you can see that the four main categories cannot be reduced. And if you add those up, that's 42.3% of that total request out of the 33.9. So if you add the four expenses we cannot modify to the salaries that we believe is non-modifiable, the 51.7 that I just reviewed, that's 94% of our budget. It leaves a remaining 2 million, 6%. And I guess you could say, okay, well, look at that. I mean, maybe there's gaps there if we have a budget deficit. I want to show you what that 2%, that 6% represents, that 2 million, because much of that is non-modifiable also. So it's here. So the top line, our technology, software, hardware, these are the programs we use to manage our finances, to manage our student information system, to manage our grading system, to manage everything that goes on in the district. And these systems are invaluable to us. We cannot operate without them. Then we have supplies. Okay, again, whatever is in red, I'm suggesting you cannot be even modified. So legal, we have to have a legal budget. And I'm just going to address the red items here. We obviously have to have property and liability insurance. We pay tuitions to other districts. We're required to have therapists and student assistants. This is required under 504, another federal program that provides assistance to students. We have to pay for an annual audit. Water, telephone, and sewer, self-evident. Waste removal, self-evident. So if you're looking at just what's left in black, it's not even close to what a potential deficit could be. And all these accounts that are in black were cut last year. It wasn't just the 24.2 positions we cut. We stripped our expense accounts before we even got to cutting those 24.2. Our people are our most valuable asset, and we do everything we can to preserve them. And so ultimately, the point I'm making is that 33.9 is the most critical number for us. It's comprised of items, personnel, and expenses that cannot be cut any deeper than they have been. I recognize that the FTR is on July 17th. We're making as many people aware of that in support of our budget. And then ultimately, the question that we're often asked is, well, what happens if you don't achieve the 33.9? And this is the most difficult slide to present to you. As you've seen in our expense accounts, there's no room left to cut there. They've been stripped over the last few years. And again, we're down to just basically what we have to have. So if you can't cut your expense accounts, you're left with looking at your personnel again. And if we were to look at that almost $1.5 million delta between what the school committee voted, the max, and what we need, we'd have to cut 20 employees. So you have our budget book. You can't find 20 employees. We could not open the school system. One of the things we've been asked to do in a very drastic measure is look at the cost savings of closing an elementary school. So we're completing that analysis. We're going to certainly be prepared, and we will at some point present that to the school committee as, you know, a last ditch option. And it certainly depends on how deep that deficit is. We're also looking at tuitioning our students to another school district. So I'll draw a corollary for you. If you're aware, Little Compton pays Portsmouth to take their high school students. And this is, again, depending on how big our deficit is another thing that we're looking at. So, you know, that's sort of the order of things that would happen. We can't cut expense accounts. So now we're left with cutting employees. We cut too many employees that we can't open. Then you're looking at closing the school and tuitioning students. So again, I want to make a point that, you know, this deficit that the school department has been carrying has been going on for years. In your budget book, there's a presentation, another PowerPoint that has a whole bunch of slides that looks at the historical funding of the schools, where you'll see year after multiple years, zero increase, zero increase, zero increase. And all those years, the school committee is using one-time money to fill those gaps. And that's, again, called a structural deficit. And when you do that, eventually you run out of one-time money and you're left with that gap. And again, my point is, if we could fill that gap one time, just fill it, give it as the base, then moving forward, the school would again be in a position to make budget requests based upon the cost of living, which is, I think, where we'd all like to be at some point. Just to finish out the presentation, because we know we've spoken to you about capital, and some of you joined us when you visited the schools a couple of weeks ago. Here are our capital requests. We know that's outside of our operating budget. We've adjusted this a little bit since we last spoke with you. The bathrooms are still on there, and we know that the bathrooms in the middle school, high school need to be renovated. We completed a couple of renovations a year ago, and everyone can see the difference between that. And we have some siding at Ranger that needs to be replaced. It's one of those things we can replace it now at a much cheaper cost, or as water continues to get beneath that siding, it could get more expensive. We were looking to replace multiple items of kitchen equipment. We've reduced that request now right down to just a dishwasher, which is $55,000. But I do want to let the budget committee know that we have reached out to multiple restaurant supply stores and are inquiring about potentially purchasing a used one. So we haven't found one yet that fits our needs, but we'll continue to pursue that. We have a new estimate from the company that provides the new ones, and that's why that was reduced. The maintenance contract for the schools is $10,000, and again, we've spoken to you about the light pole at the high school and the necessity for that. So there's our capital request. But I know I speak for the school committee when I say this to you, that we will sacrifice everything on this list to achieve the $33.9 million operating budget. Our business is educating students. Our success is predicated on the people we employ. If we can continue to employ those people, we can continue to provide an excellent education for our students. So I'm going to stop the share. I know it's a lot of information. You have a lot of backup in the budget book we provided. Again, we have Dr. Larkin, Amy Roderick, Diane Farnsworth with us this evening. So whatever questions you have, we're certainly happy to answer.
So I'll open up the floor to any members that want to question. John?
Mr. Chair. So obviously somewhat of a dire situation, but I do have a number of questions related to the budget. So first off, Dr. Sanchioni and Dr. Larkin, are you guys aware that your state allocation is going to be $700,000 less this year?
Yes, that's.
So we're talking about a significant increase above and beyond that $1 million or that $1,075,000 deficit you're talking about. So it's really 1.7.
Not sure I follow you there, John.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm trying to.
So on one of the first slides, you had that 33,201 number, which was comprised of the local contribution, state aid at 7.4 million, Medicaid funds, and fund balance. And so with 7.4 million going down to 6.7 million, that really gives you a deficit of 1.7 million, not 1 million. Correct?
So actually, John, I think I do understand what you're getting at. The fact of the matter is that if state aid is cut, ultimately that also still needs to be made up by the town as a part of maintenance of effort. So if you flat funded us this year, or if the town said, it's the same budget, then the decrease in state aid would actually also have to be made up by the taxpayers. That's kind of the brutal truth of it, because dropping state aid does not drop the absolute number of the budget that would be brought forward for the next year as part of maintenance of effort. You can only decrease maintenance of effort by significant drops in enrollment. So what I'm getting at, it doesn't change the operational budget. Yes, it does change the ultimate local levy. That is true.
So I guess the question that I'm actually asking here is what is the school department asking for in a local levy? to make up the difference, because it's not going to be 24.6. You're here asking for like 27 million.
You would have so the state aid is not yet determined, but that is the projection. So I don't think that it's going to be any different, but you would have to, if you were going to look at what the local levy is, you would have to take into account any drop in state aid. And we're projecting a drop in state aid this year.
So Dr. Larkin, just to be blunt, what is the number you're looking for from the municipality?
We would have to, Amy,
I hate to be like, to be quick, but like this is what we're here talking about. Like this, you should know this number right off the bat.
It's hard to know.
John, you are on the budget committee. You tell me then.
I mean, I can do the math, but we're sitting here talking about a presentation that's assuming that we're going to get 7.4 million in state aid. We know the number is going to be 6.7. That number's been out for a week and a half now. I personally, I feel like we're having circular discussions here. And, again, I don't think that this is your intent, but I want to make sure that we're productive with our time here on the budget committee. And it feels like we're talking about hypotheticals. Like we need to know, the budget committee needs to know what the number is.
The implication of your question,
get there.
Okay. Well, I was trying to answer your question and I was trying to refer you to someone who might have those numbers more readily. And the implication of your question was that was our intent. Anyway, what I would recommend we do is see if Ms. Roderick could actually do that number as quickly as she can. But so a $33.9 million budget that if we back out the state aid from what we are projecting, okay, and Amy, do you have that number off the top of your head?
I'll have it for you in just a minute. I just want to verify the state aid number, which I believe is 6.8 million. So
okay. 6.8 million. So John, let me answer.
Yeah.
So 6.8 million from 33.9, all right, is 27.1 million.
Okay.
That's the number.
Roughly, right? Because it's 6774565.
Roughly,
is the actual
yes,
number.
roughly.
Yeah.
27.1.
So we're looking at assuming we come up with a 3.9, a 6.3% based on everything that the budget committee has discussed so far. Where's Tom Haley? He's the keeper of the docket. Assuming my math is correct, we're 2.38% over the cap.
Yeah, I wasn't ready to
again, a 33.9 million. You guys can't approve a 33.9 million budget either. Just to be clear about that. It would have to probably be a petitioner's budget. You can approve a 32.5, I think.
Okay, so follow-up question, just because it's not in the book here. Dr. Sanchione, you had a slide that was up that showed state funding payments that were coming in. So you guys have received this year so far, what, 427,000 and change?
No, 265 if I use round numbers.
And we've spent about 550. So
Okay.
we are still at a loss for the additional COVID expenses, John.
Okay. And we're not expecting any money from the latest round of stimulus that came out to wind up in our hands?
No, it's unknown. There's probably
Okay.
a 760,000 that's going to come from the stimulus that was passed in December. We do not have the guidance as to how that can actually be spent. So what can we attribute that to, or what can we cover with that with? We are not yet sure. And then the stimulus that was passed 2 or 3 weeks ago, if you know, please let us know, but nobody else knows what that is. And you also have to understand, we still have to go through the process of applying for that 763. It seems fairly firm, okay? But both Congress has acted slowly. I'm not sure how fast our legislature is going to act, and I'm not sure how fast RIDE is going to act.
Gotcha.
So
Have you,
the fundamental problem really in many regards is that even with backing up and this is the thing that, maybe you guys sort of understand already, but the fundamental problem is that all the funding last year was level. Because of the process of our budget, we will have an FTR in July 2017, July. We have to have our budget balanced by June 30th. Obviously, that's before then. Any amount of backing up the FTR is gonna not account for the fact that this money is even though, the money to individuals is moving a lot faster, and certainly in the prior stimulus packages, money to small businesses moved a lot faster. The money to, schools and local governments is moving pretty slow. Okay. That's probably the bigger question you're going to need to try and answer.
Amy's Amy.
So, Mr. Edwards, I can tell you that the guidance for the 763,000 is still with the Department of Education. The U.S. Department of Education on the federal level. And they are trickling that down to RIDE. And we're expecting the application and the guidance for that per the finance director at RIDE by the end of April.
So we are still not whole for the COVID costs.
But we are not whole for the COVID costs.
For this, school year, this fiscal year. Correct.
And all indicators ahead of the guidance from the U.S. Department of Ed and RIDE is that this funding will be more geared towards direct services towards the kids, not to cover the COVID mitigation expenses. So we have absorbed close to $300,000 of COVID expenses in the current year.
So Mr. Edwards, Mr. Souza, I don't know if you would be able to recognize Mrs. Farnworth. I know she wants to say something now. If you
please, Diane, go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Larkin, I just wanted to backtrack a little bit on part of the conversation that was going on about 5 minutes ago. We as a school committee are limited in our official request to ask for more than 4%. However, the town may give us as much as the town can afford to give us. There is no ceiling. The town cannot bust the 4% tax increase. But my contention is that the town will not need to go anywhere near a 4% increase when you take everything into consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
So, I mean, well, I'll stop here. We'll have to look at that, because if those numbers are those numbers, we'd be looking at a 6.38 increase right now.
Again, our budget increase would not necessarily translate to a tax increase of the same amount.
No, I understand. I mean, a municipality would have to cut to the bone in order to make up the difference. Correct.
And that lies the problem, that we have to fund our police and fire department, public works. There's a lot of expenses in this town and a lot of equipment on the town side that is, been put off for years and years. I just want to say, I have a lot of friends in business that have pretty much learned how to cut. And unfortunately, our school is going to have to learn either to cut or to do things differently. Now, I mean, just for an existing foreign language teachers, I'm seeing this talk to use Zoom and have one teacher teaching multiple communities. How feasible that is, I don't know. I'm not an educator. But my point is, we need to start thinking outside the box. Transportation out of control. I mean, years ago, towns owned the buses. Would it be cheaper to buy our own buses and hire some drivers? I mean, we really need to start looking outside the box. And we need to figure out ways to educate the children for less, because there's no way we can ask the taxpayers in this town, many who have been laid off for a year, to come up with that type of an increase. I mean, my salary's been cut in half since COVID. I can't work in people's homes. Even I actually just said, hell, I retired. So I don't know. I mean, I want to help. I want to give the schools as much as we can, but I don't know how we can justify that much money. So,
Joe, if I could respond to what you're saying, I think Dr. Sanquioni laid out fairly clearly. We have cut up, we cut 22 full-time positions last year. We've cut our expense counts to the bone. One of the things that businesses actually do not face when they try to cut is the statutory requirements imposed by the legislature. One of the interesting ways to think of this is that actually it's the legislature that is the ultimate school committee for the state. The authority that we have, they confer to us. And so when they pass a statute that says the basic educational plan must be met, we don't have any choice. And not that we would try and make a different choice, but that's the thing that you have to understand, is that we're up against not just the financial town referendum calendar, but the statutes of the legislature, the regulations by RIDE, the requirements around special education. These are all good things, and they all serve to make our town stronger. They serve to make our children more rounded. But they're also things that in many regards, we have no choice but to do, perhaps because that's the right thing to do.
well, I see, to me, I say, no, we tell them as soon as you send the check, we'll do it. I say we need a little bit of a revolt in this town. Yeah, I know, and they'll sue us and everything else. But
Doesn't
you know
work that
what?
way, Joe.
If we don't stop making,
You're just asking for litigation.
you know what? Hey, maybe it'll bring attention to these legislators that are mandating these, I mean, what do the unfunded mandates, where are we now? I mean, it's like, what do we have, $10 million in unfunded mandates, and they want to give us less than 7 now? It's crazy. We got to make
You'll have
some
to change
noise.
the Constitution. All right.
Well, I'm not talking about the Constitution of the state. I'm talking about laws that have been passed by our legislature. And I know what you're talking about because I've been around long enough to see the legislature in action. I understand what you're talking about, state requirements. I also know we can file a waiver, but it doesn't mean it's going to be accepted. So
I haven't been around as long as
I just think we need to make a lot of noise. I mean, if you don't get the money, what do you do? I mean, I'm sorry, Dave, go ahead. I talked enough. Go ahead.
I just have a few questions for Dr. Sanquioni. They had a slide up and it had a number of $550,000. I think that was for fans and different.
Yep.
All right. Is that all going to be reimbursed to us?
So, and if I could just jump back one point before I answer your question, Mr. Perry. What Dr. Larkin was referring to is the BEP. I actually provided that documentation to you in your budget book under additional information. So if you want to understand what we're required to provide, it's all there for you. So, I encourage you to take a look at that because that's what 33.9 accomplishes. There's nothing more to that. To your question, Mr. Perry, no, we spent in this PowerPoint here, we outlined to you that we spent $550,969 to open our schools. One of the wisest investments the school committee made. We, again, one of the few school departments in Rhode Island that's been open in September and has stayed open throughout this entire pandemic, educating our students in person. But however, we received $265,978 in mitigation. That is the extent of that mitigation money that we will receive this year. So to the point Dr. Larkin and Mrs. Roderick were both making, we're down about $300,000. We had to find that in our budget this year. We had to cut multiple other places, but it was a significant hit for us.
Okay. You're in contract negotiations with Council 94 right now, or will be?
Will be.
Have you anticipated an increase, and is that in the budget?
We have to bargain in good faith. So it's hard for me to answer that question. Right now, our budget reflects our contractual mandates as they currently stand in the contracts we have.
Okay. Does anyone know what the cost of living increase was this last year?
0.3 for Social Security.
What was it, Joe?
0.3 for Social Security.
0.3. Okay, and yet I have in front of me all the principals and superintendents with increases of anywhere from 2 to 7. That doesn't make any sense to me when cost of living, and you talked about cost of living before, Dr. Sanquioni. Yet here we are giving all these people 2 and 7% increases. Just doesn't make any sense to me at all. That's all I have.
I'm not sure where your numbers are coming from.
Well, they're coming right off of the sheet that you sent out.
Okay, I would say to you that they mirror the contractual increase that were given to all members of the Tiverton Public Schools.
These were just the principals.
But the
We had some merit increases for the principals, Mr. Perry.
They had merit increases also?
We had merit increases in certain cases, yes.
Well, it doesn't say that on here. It just says an increase of 7% for the middle school principal. 4% for other ones. It says nothing about merit. I hope that's not more than what we're
No,
giving them now.
That's what those numbers reflect, is what I'm trying to say.
It's okay.
You all set, Dave?
Yeah, I guess so.
John, please.
So, Mr. Chair, I don't know if now is the time, but I do have a number of questions about line items in the budget book that were given out to us.
From the school?
Yeah.
Oh, it's the time.
Okay. All right. So account 53222, web-based supplemental instruction program. Looks like you guys are looking for 110,000. And when I look back on the budget to actuals, FY20, we spent 64,000, FY19, 72,000, FY18, 34,000, FY17, 25,000. Is there any reason why that number is much higher than what we've spent in prior years?
Where are we right now? We're all on Zoom. Right.
So it's account 53. Yeah. So, I mean, I paid for Zoom myself. It's, 106.
So so the point is we have tried to bring our technology and support for education technology into the 21st century. That's what most of those expenses are. So we went to one. So every student had a Chromebook. We had to do professional development. We had to, I think we also increased our security, and we increased our web access throughout the entire school. So basically it's trying to create a 21st century because we are 21 years into it,
So should we anticipate 110 as the baseline moving forward, and in subsequent years, that number is only going to increase?
I would think that number will stabilize, but part of that number also comprises virtual online classes for our students. So when you cut 24.2 positions and you can't offer the same classes at Tiverton High School that you had in the past, and you have students who want to take certain AP classes that we can't offer or other electives that we can't offer, we still provide that opportunity through virtual classes. So that drives that up also.
Gotcha. All right. So next line item was 53301, professional development and training. I have it here. You guys are looking for 60,000 this year. Last year was 50,000. Year before that was 30 before, 19 before that, 30 before that. So it seems like roughly 30 is the number based on past spending history.
It's hard to say what the numbers on an annual basis. To a point Dr. Larkin was making, we spent a lot of time training our staff on how to use technology to deliver instruction. And so we brought in some high quality PD to do that. We're also improving their teaching strategies that they use in the classroom, things of that nature. And that number, again, varies from year to year. I would say, using 30, it would be a low estimate.
Also, Mr. Edwards, we reclassified some of the budget for curriculum development into professional development. So
Okay.
It was just moving a line item. It wasn't necessarily a direct increase entirely.
Okay. So that number encompasses curriculum as well?
Yes,
Curriculum development.
because they
All
go, and Mrs. Donnelly Roach can clarify for me, but as I understand it, they go hand in hand, curriculum development as well as the professional development. They're sort of one and the same, particularly in the electronic and technology age.
Okay. Thank you. Next one is 53401. Looks like we're looking for 38,000. Last year was 32. Year before that was 30. Year before that was 32.
Is that the audit services?
Yeah. Is that a new contract where the cost just went up
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went out to bid and we have a 3-year contract and the price went up.
Gotcha. And that's not the same auditor that the town's using, correct?
No, it is. It's all
Yeah,
one
in
and the
fact,
same.
it's the town council that makes the decision. We don't really
All right.
have much input into that.
Cool, thank you. So 53,402 legal services. It looks like we're looking for 100,000. But last year, the school department spent 150. Year before that was 91. Year before that was 114. I just want to make sure that that's an accurate representation of what we anticipate, because it seems like the trend is up on the legal side.
Yeah, I think that's a good estimate. Looking at what we're dealing with, both what's required and what's unanticipated.
Okay, thank you. Next one. Next one that I had here is actually that one's pretty accurate. Sorry, my apologies. 5305. Where did 5305 go? Oh, 53502. All right, so the other one was 53502. You guys have it classified as other technical services. 63,000 for this coming FY, but last year was 150,000. Year before that was 100. It just seems like that number is not in line with what we've historically spent there.
That's one of the cuts that we made. We're doing without certain things. That parallels the FY21 budget. We made when we did some of the cuts to meet the FY21 budget, we brought it down. So that while it may not be accurate, that's what the technology department is going to work with.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had, and this is just a general guess, but it's a peanut one, but $1,000 for snow plowing / removal. I thought that the town was actually handling those services for you. I didn't realize that you contracted those out.
Well, or we do it ourselves from the sidewalks in, as you know.
Yep. Okay, so that's just to pay the guys to go out, the maintenance guys to go out and do it.
Or it's for our own snow blowers, our own snow removal equipment.
Okay.
It's not their salary. It's the
shovel,
salt, sand.
Okay. No, listen, this is the whole point. We go through these things line by line with the municipal side. We should be doing it line by line with the school department side too. So let's see, 56,101. So the next one was 56,101, general supplies and materials. Again, if I look back at FY20, that number was 324,000. So it's about $100,000 less.
So I can tell you, Mr. Edwards, I'm sorry, Mrs. Farnworth, would you like to speak?
I apologize. I didn't realize I wasn't on mute, but I will say it right out. That was a cut that we painfully instituted last year.
Okay. What does that
Several
encompass?
accounts that were pointedly hit.
So Mr. Edwards, it's not only instructional supplies, scholar supplies, things like that for direct classroom instruction. It's also our custodial supplies, building supplies, sort of any ancillary item that's, that we need to clean the schools, maintain the schools. If like we have to go out and buy, I don't know, something for plumbing, it falls under plumbing supplies, and it's that object code of 56,101.
Okay. Now, and listen, part of this is important to talk about because I'm sure there's a number of constituents out there that are watching this and, they don't have this detail behind them or in front of them. So it's important for them to know what's already been done away with.
To Mr. Edwards, we did go through this line by line at the school committee meetings as well.
And it's all publicly available if they want.
Yeah.
Okay. So 57,309, that technology related hardware. That's a budget item that I'm actually very curious about because, coming in at 123, it looks like we've way overshot that number the last few years.
Those are the Chromebook leases. So I can't speak to the years prior, but I know that in order to get a device into the hands of every student, we have to have a rotating supply of Chromebooks, and it comes from that line.
So can we anticipate that number being consistent from here on out, or is
Yes.
Yes,
okay. Absolutely.
Sustainability plan. K-12
Gotcha.
sustainability.
So just for my own edification, when I look at FY20 and FY19, what was the reason for, collectively the, $600,000 spend over those 2 years?
In that line item?
Yeah. I apologize for the rest of the members because I have these previous years in front of me. I'm not sure if they do.
It's all right. Keep going.
Well, I provided it to you, Mr. Edwards, at your request. I did not provide it to anyone else.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
To your question, you're asking why we spent 600,000 over the previous 2 fiscal years before that.
So FY20 and FY19.
So
like FY19 was 400,000 and FY20 was 200,000. Those were numbers that just blew the budget line item there up pretty big.
Except some of those were paid for through our fund balance. So those were authorized expenditures.
Okay. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. 2 other questions. So professional organization fees and other dues and fees. What professional organizations are you guys a member of? And what is in other dues and fees? Those would be 58-101 and 58-102.
The other dues and fees are the athletic participation fees, the associations that the Rhode Island, the Rhode Island Interscholastic
League. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, that's what the other dues and fees are. Things like of that nature that are not academic.
Okay. So what about 58-101,
Yep.
professional
So that's
organization?
what the school committee is part of the Rhode Island School Committee Association. The superintendent's part of the Rhode Island Superintendent Association. The business managers part of the Rhode Island Business Managers. Our assistant superintendent, our principals are part of the high school one, the middle school one, the elementary one. Our teachers, we have teachers who are involved in associations for math development, for language arts development, for reading development, things of that nature.
Okay. Thank you.
Dave.
Go ahead.
Oh, God, I just lost. Okay, I have 2 questions. I'd like to get a copy of that also, Amy.
Okay.
I'll send it to you, Dave.
All right, John, take care of it. I just have one question on the back of the book here. On the high school, you got listed a Dawn Brayton as the assistant principal secretary and a dollar amount. And then I don't know if there's 2 Dawn Braytons. There's another one listed under the middle school. Another Dawn Brayton for 20,000. Is that a mistake, or are there 2 Dawn Braytons?
Dawn moved over to the high school, and it sounds like we just didn't update the middle school.
Okay, so that 20,000 has to come out.
And I believe that was filled by someone else.
The names a lot of the names in this book could be off a little bit with retirements and people who've resigned during the year or changed positions during the year, but the position still remained.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. That's good. Thank you.
Got a question.
Go ahead, Mike.
Doctors, whoever wants to answer can. What was the source of the Medicaid funds that were mentioned at the beginning of the presentation? And they were mentioned as a one-time benefit. We're not going to, do you anticipate seeing anything from Medicaid going forward?
Yeah, we receive Medicaid money from the federal government for services provided on certain IEPs, and we track those services and we bill back to the federal government for those, and we receive it. So you may recall in the presentation, I still showed an amount that would be available in our budget, 75,000. And so, yes, we can on an annual basis, we'll pull in anywhere between 75 to maybe 150,000 reimbursement. What had happened in the Tiverton schools is for a number of years that pool built up, and the school committee then used it in large chunks over the last couple of years to balance our budget. But again, one-time money, right? So it's no longer available.
Okay, I understand. And this is maybe your crystal ball time, but with the pending legislation regarding charter schools, what impact do charter schools have on Tiverton schools?
simple formula, money follows the student, right? So every student who left Tiverton to go to a charter school would impact our funding from the state.
So that number from the state, depending on over the summer where students, if a block of students chose to go to a new charter school, we could lose significant state funding.
It would be the following year. So it's based on October 1st enrollment. So there's a hold harmless for 1 year, but there's a moratorium on charter schools right now. So we would probably be status quo for a few years.
Yeah, and I know they're trying to do a 3-year moratorium, but we currently have a governor who's very much in favor of them. So he has indicated he's not going to allow that to occur.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Janik, if I can sort of speak to that as well.
Absolutely.
You know, the charter schools ideally are supposed to be a laboratory to try out different ideas in education. What they have turned into, in effect, is another way to defund public education. And what I mean by that is that the per pupil cost that a kid brings from the public schools to a charter school doesn't actually represent the true cost of that individual kid. That individual child's cost may be greater. In most cases, that individual child's costs are smaller, because what the charter schools will not typically take are children who have extensive IEPs or require a lot of other services. We also don't get any real decrease in cost by volume because we still have to have a principal. We still have to have, you know, sort of all these other parts of the educational system, or it will fall apart for want of, you know, organization. So just to, you know, answer your question, what impact do charter schools have? They basically, no matter how you split it, and people will argue it in different ways, but the only true answer is charter schools oftentimes erode the support of public schools. There really isn't any true answer than that.
I understand what you're saying. I agree. You still have to maintain the buildings. You have to heat them and everything else that goes along with it, whether you've got 20 students or whether you've got 10 students.
Correct.
Right? But you're working with a lower pool of money for the charter school students if they leave.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Dave,
Yeah, I'd like to discuss some of the capital requests, Dr. Sancho.
Sure.
I know we looked at the buildings a couple of weeks ago, and I know that the refurbishing of the bathrooms is #1 on here at $350,000. The siding at $750,000, I think that's something that definitely needs to be taken care of. The kitchen equipment at $90,000. I saw a memo, and I can't find it now, where I believe it was like a $33,000 for installation of that equipment.
that was the machine, right? Then it was 15 install it, I thought I read.
Was it 15 to install it?
Yeah,
Seemed like a large
like
number.
30. It was like 30 some to buy it, and then it was another like 15 or 20 for the
15 to
install.
install it.
It was
Okay.
55,000 basically.
Okay, and that's down from the 90, I hope.
Well, as I said earlier, we revised the request. The original request was for kitchen and equipment, so multiple pieces. We've now dropped that down just to the dishwasher.
Correct. Yeah. So that number would drop to 55 from the 90. Correct.
That is correct. And again, we are pursuing a used option.
Okay. The maintenance contract for the heating, I think that's something that we really have to do also. I was on that project for many years, and in order to keep it going the way it should be, I think we need that heating contract. Should definitely be, actually, I think it should be in your budget and not in a capital request, because it's going to be happening every year. So you're going to have to capital request that every year. Correct, or am I wrong?
You are correct.
You are correct. That was one of the things we wound up cutting last year because we couldn't cut any more teachers.
Yeah. I mean, we spent so much money on that whole project. I'd hate to see it fall apart because we're not maintaining it.
Yeah, well, hopefully when, the voters voted to renovate the schools,
Right.
voters hopefully we'll see the wisdom in trying to maintain them as well as trying to maintain the quality of education. But this is, one of the problems of chronically underfunding.
And that light replacement, did we get another quote from anyone, or, I'm hearing that this is pretty old.
You're
light?
talking about the light pole, and
Yes.
we went back to the company who gave us the original quote, and they're maintaining that offer for us right now.
We only have one quote.
We only have one quote, correct?
Is there anyone else out there that does lights? That
We looked. It seems to be a really specified or special type of thing where you can obtain that equipment and install it. But, certainly we'll look at anyone else we can find.
who was that quote? Who was that quote from? If I could ask.
I think it was called Realco. I can get that to you.
Yeah, I think, Peter, you're right. Was it Ralco, R-A-L-C-O? I don't have it in front of me, but I remember seeing it.
Oh, Ralco out in Westport. Granite Electric. I mean, they do Fenway Park. That's what that light looks like.
Height, Dave. The height of
Looks like it belongs at Fenway Park.
I'm sure it requires a massive footing as well.
Yeah, it's a big light.
Well, you
Okay,
should-
that's
Should have the footing already.
One of the things that, we're using that as an estimate for financial purposes with you, but as you know, we'll have to go out to bid for this.
yes.
So that price could fluctuate. Maybe we'd get lucky and someone came in for less, but we're giving you a placeholder right now for what we think it could cost.
Okay, thank you.
John?
So staying on the capital piece, one of the things that obviously I'm a little concerned about is if we look at some of the out years. I think I understand the whole AC. There is no AC in THS, so that would be the addition of that. But $1.4 million, between that and TMS, that's a huge number that we're looking at for next fiscal year. And then the other question that I had is, like the plumbing replaced piping for water distribution, or is it the plan to rip every single piece of pipe out of the high school? Because 1.8 seems like a massive undertaking.
Right, that would be it, because what happens is you're getting pipes that are cracking and opening up in certain sections of the building, and you know what it's like to get in there and start pulling them out. So if you're looking out, just know that some of the things on this list are on there so we can present it to RIDE for reimbursement. It doesn't mean would actually come to the budget committee for that actual request. Part of this is a documentation exercise that we have to go through as our 5-year plan. So
I guess my question on the plumbing thing, right? So if we're talking about renovating bathrooms this year, wouldn't we want to replace the pipes that they're all flowing into first and water's flowing through before we get to the bathrooms?
I wouldn't put that as a priority over the bathrooms right now. We're maintaining those pipes. I think that's a predictive type cost that we have on there. And that's also, again, I would say the purpose of listing that there is that if we did do another renovation at the high school, by listing it and documenting it, if we don't do that, we do not qualify for reimbursement. And so we want to list it that way.
Gotcha. How old is the backup generator at TMS?
I'm going to have to get you an answer on that.
I mean, I don't expect you to have that handy, but
I'll get that for
I'm
you.
just curious because, I know those things typically last for a while.
Yeah.
Well, they don't run much, that's why.
Yeah. Well, they should run like every week or whatever. They just turn on and turn off just so that.
Half hour or something.
Keep them going. From the capital perspective, I understand like we have to do the siding at Ranger. That's an absolute imperative because if not, like that's going to just create additional problems. But, the maintenance contract, that makes a ton of sense. How much use are we getting out of the dishwasher today? I mean, is that something that's running? I thought Aaron Mark was coming in and taking everything out.
No, that dishwasher at the high school is used extensively day to day, and Some of you may recall last year when you came to visit, you caught it after it had used and you saw the floor was flooded.
Yeah.
And so every day it floods the floor. We've been cited by the Department of Health multiple times for using it, but it's a necessity to have it. There's just no way we can be efficient and effective in serving lunches to that many kids and keeping the kitchen sanitized, especially in times of COVID. We want things sanitized. So that thing is still used extensively.
So one of the things that I would take a look at, instead of sourcing a used unit, but typically in the restaurant space, the restaurants don't ever purchase these things outright. They're actually given to them by the supplier. So you pick up the phone and call an Ecolab as an example, and Ecolab's going to juice you on the, inputs into it, the dish detergent and the sanitizer and all that stuff. That's how they make their money. But typically it's a very marginal maintenance account. So I spoke to somebody who runs a large restaurant group down in Newport. They just put one of these units in, and Ecolab did it for $157,000 a month. I'm sorry, $157 a month, not 157,000. Talking in huge numbers here. $157 a month, which included monthly service, and then they just had to buy all the inputs from Ecolab. So that might be a better option and one that's more cost effective than purchasing the unit and owning it outright.
Take a look at that. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have one more question, not on capital, but on the new requests. Have the new requests been scrapped in the budget that we're talking about, or are those still being looked for?
Let me just make sure we're talking the same thing.
Yeah, the mass specialist RTI coordinators.
No, that's an exercise we go through to show the school committee that if we could improve the school system, if we could move forward, this is what we'd be looking at, but none of those are in the budget.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thor? You're muted, I think. There you go.
So do you have an expected time when the analysis for what your cost savings would be if you actually close the school would be?
No, I think we were working with the school committee to make that decision when we want to go there. There's just so many variables, Thor, without knowing the exact state funding, without knowing federal funding, and to make a presentation that's that drastic, we want to be absolutely sure that that's the direction we have to go in. And certainly meeting with you folks tonight and getting a sense of what you're going to support in our budget is also a key factor in us understanding what a potential deficit is. We're certainly hopeful that there is no deficit.
Yeah, I appreciate all your efforts to keep the schools open, and certainly you can't battle, like Dr. Larkin says, you really can't. It's hard to battle state legislature and legislation concerning what you need to support and whatnot. But obviously, when you're looking at solutions for the town, obviously it may seem extremely drastic, but looking at something like closing a school is certainly an option that you really have to look at seriously to see if it does provide a cost savings that solves some of the problems we're looking at in the long term, and see what really that incorporates and if it's possible, and how that works itself into a discussion about contracting and things like that in the future. So now that you're dealing with contracts and things like that, it seems like this is an opportune time to really take a quick look at something like that and push that discussion and do that analysis as quickly as possible so it can be incorporated into all those discussions to see if that's an option that's much more feasible than most people want to think about, but certainly that might be an option that may not be desirable in most people's minds, but something that may need to be looked at for the long-term benefit of the community going forward, so that we can afford the school system going forward, particularly if we're going to start having some issues with charter schools that are going to reduce the number of students in our schools, then that may be an option that may in fact be a little bit more reasonable as well, with a reduction in school population.
Certainly not an option that we want to pursue. There's so many variables to that would degrade the education we offer right now. And our population isn't decreasing. Matter of fact, In your budget book, we've given you a population that's showing a trend. You probably have seen the building taking place in Tiverton. The new houses that are coming in, they all have multiple bedrooms, which means usually children come with them. So we're not expecting a population decrease.
Funny, because the census said we lost population.
Depends on, I guess, the age group, right?
Yeah, it was said 100, it was only 100 and some, but we actually, according to the census, I had Mike, then John, then Dave were up.
Actually, Doctor, you mentioned what I was going to question. I was going to go back to that projected enrollment, and you basically answered my question. I was wondering where the projections were coming from. So
we use an agency that helps with that. They look at a birth cohort model, which tracks births and people living in Tiverton at certain age groups. They also look at the available homes in town, the homes coming online, the homes program to come online, which is why we can look out that far. And it's been pretty accurate. This is why we use it on an annual basis. So we're pretty confident we're not going to be going down.
All right, good. I think hopefully there'll be taxpayers.
Right.
John.
That was essentially what I was going to ask as well, because I know we've got multiple housing developments that are, moving forward through the planning board, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Dr. Sanquioni, but is the number of available classrooms that's predicated on the number of potential students that we have, and so adding a 285 house development into the town would necessitate the need for more classrooms, not less.
You're absolutely right. Right number of students in a classroom. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to reinforce what John just said. Coming off the planning board and seeing all these developments that are coming into town, I can tell you that I think John said there were 233 houses going up just on Sousa Road. That project does go through, and I believe it is. There's no doubt. And there are other projects that are coming up also that are going to create more children into our school system and not less. So I'd hate to see us close.
Not to mention, we're still paying for all three of the elementary schools. I'm assuming you're not going to close the high school. So if you're closing one of the elementary schools, you'd be shuttering a building that the taxpayers would still be paying off the bonds on.
You are correct.
But physically, you could fit all the kids in the two schools right now.
2 elementary schools?
Yeah.
Well, it would require then shifting a grade to the middle school and then moving middle school kids to the high school.
Okay. So it's more than just putting them into the.
Yeah, you can't fit all the elementary kids in 2 schools. No, there's no available. All our elementary schools are at capacity. So if you're going to move,
really not an option. it's
not a good option at all.
Yeah, I can imagine parents, if you had to move kids up, out of the elementary into the middle school, they'd be,
Well, 33.9 avoids that, Joe, and then I don't have to give them your phone number.
Yeah. Hopefully Joe Biden sends us all that money and it won't be, delegated for, unisex bathrooms or something. So. Is there any, Diane, go ahead.
Thanks, Joe. I do have one question with regard to capital, and it's not just the school capital, it's capital in general. Now that the town council has control over the casino funds for use in capital, how is that going to work with the budget committee?
It was my plan to put in a resolve that would deal with the question of the casino money, and that the casino money would go into the capital program. So it would go to fund the projects. And now that we're funding capital outside of your budget, the school committee would, be part of that funding process. That's how we planned it until this current ordinance, which in my opinion violates the charter, but since they got the solicitor to give them the type of opinion they wanted, we're stuck with it right now. So I'm assuming that because it seems to me that the school committee should, if we get $3 million in school, $3 million in casino money,
Big
Well,
if right now.
million, I would think that, you know, a portion of that should go to school capital as well. So,
And really, the way it's set up right now, though, it would be the town council approving the capital, not the budget committee, at least with the ordinance that they put in place.
well, I had thought that the budget committee should just put the resolve in anyway. But then I was told that the solicitor will go to the Board of Canvass and knock it off. So it would say it'll be, doesn't meet muster. And without going into court and fighting a big battle, which I don't want to do because we can't afford the legal fees. We just have to.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I understand. I'm just not sure who's going to approve what. And that's really what the question was.
Well, let me tell you for myself, I plan on voting to fund Ranger School repairs, the washing machine, at the high school, and I guess the pole. We got to get that pole back up so we can have sports this year. Those were the three things on capital that I felt were the priorities that I'd be willing to support this year. So, I mean, that would be, outside of your budget. It would be in the capital budget, even though you manage the money. So, I mean, the capital is going to be there one way or the other, as far as I'm concerned. On the town side, we'll just, all their capital for roads and stuff will have to be funded through the casino money. If they want to control that end of the money, then we'll just won't put any money in the budget. It will have to be if we get the money in. But I
would think that the school capital would come from the casino money as well.
Well, unfortunately, as I said, you had 5 members of the town council that decided differently, and they have a solicitor backing it up. So,
okay, I guess we'll have more conversation on that in other forms. I just wanted to make a couple of points, as you guys deliberate. Look, I've done a little bit of research outside of the actual line items for the school budget, and one of the things that I just want to call attention to, I don't believe that you guys have gone through the revenue estimates yet as part of the process this year.
Well, we received preliminary, but we haven't had any firm numbers come in. Okay.
Well, in looking at the actual revenues coming into the town, the fiscal 21 year-to-date revenues are actually ahead of both the estimates that were put in and ahead of the fiscal 20 revenues. Yeah. So I think in that regard, it's a positive for all of us, meaning, the town is realizing what it had hoped to realize and more.
Yeah.
I think also as a result of the audit last year, we all learned that the town, the town meaning all of us, has a very healthy fund balance.
Is it 1.3 million?
Well above the 3% minimum requirement.
Yeah, I think it was 1.3 million above the cap.
Yeah. Above the and just in closing, right?
Restricted account, rather.
Yep. The children of Tiverton, they deserve a decent education. I don't think anybody here would deny that. And there's so many good things happening in our community that we have pride for. The last 5 years or so, there does seem to be an increase in community pride, right? Our police and fire, they're really garnering a high level of respect from nearly everyone in our community. Our library is growing in its membership and its programs, all great things. Our beaches, right? The big project at Grinnell's and Fogland's been getting some attention. I know they're as popular for families as ever. And now we've got this new dog park coming, which I think is, I'm hearing it's going to be a real big draw to people, to families, to all kinds of community members. I think we need to remember the community is made up of all of us, those of us who have children, those of us who do not. And I think, as a community that is full of pride, we owe it to these kids to give them a good education. And we need to start funding it like we need to. The town's share of that education has been steadily declining every single year. And we're getting to the point where some of the drastic measures that Dr. Sanquioni has, made mention of could very well come to be. And I'd hate to see that happen. So I ask you all very respectfully and very honestly to strongly consider providing us the funding we need to continue. Thank you.
Diane, I think the portion of the general fund that's not restricted above that 3% was 1.3 million. And that
I
could
think it was closer to 1.7, but I'll go back. I was trying to look at the audit site.
Well, either way, we'll have firm numbers on that. I just want to say, okay, this town, yes, has a lot of community spirit, but just keep in mind that just in our industrial park alone, we've turned down like $1 billion worth of businesses that wanted to go into that industrial park. And people came out in groves saying that they want a small rural town. They don't want business in town. That's going to be, and we actually have zoning that we can't have. You can't even build a big building in this town with our zoning. So keep in mind, while we do want it all, we really don't want the businesses to fund it. So, people want everything, but if you don't have the money to fund it, then so short of, a bucket of money coming in, we got some real problems coming up, and we're going to do our best to fund every dollar that we can. But I can't just go to senior citizens that are living on Social Security and got like a 1.3% increase over the last 5 years and ask them to just come up with another several $100s every year on top of the thousands they're already paying. So there has to be that balance. And I think the parents with kids in school have to also think about the grandparents. So that's just all I want to say. Dave.
So I just have one comment. I know people keep talking about that general fund and that it's over $1.7 million. You got to remember that, and I don't know what the number is that we're looking for to be in that general fund. That general fund money helps us when we go out for grants. And I know the schools just got one for RIDE. And I guarantee you that, they looked at that general fund amount and said, okay, Tiverton is in pretty good shape. So, let's not just sit back and think, well, let's throw all that money out of the general fund, because that general fund does help us in the long run. And again, I don't know if it's 3 million over the cap or 2 million or 1.5, but we need that money in the general fund. It does help.
Well, I agree. We don't want to touch the restricted portion of it. But last year, the budget committee did real low expectations for revenue, and they came in higher than we expected. That's why that budget, that surplus grew. We did the right thing last year. So if we saved a little money last year, I don't have a problem with using it to catch up this year. And as long as we don't go and dip into that 3%, we're within our own charter, right? We're good. So, is there anybody else?
Joe, I have just one thing to say on the tail of what you just mentioned, that, the expectations were really low and you don't mind catching up. I think one of the things that has also been lost in some of this discussion is that we had a structural deficit last year because we were flat funded from FY20 to 21. That structural deficit was due to our contractual obligations. Those contracts were executed 3 years ago. That did give Dave a 3% increase to NEA and Council 94. That created, that right there created something like an $800,000 or a $900,000 deficit, structural deficit for us to carry forward. We didn't even get the increase that, many members of this committee voted for in March before the whole process was suspended. And I certainly, the school department at that time, when the financial town referendum finally occurred by the charter, we could have put in our own budget, and in retrospect, maybe we should have. But the sentiment of the committee was that we were so uncertain about revenue, about the pandemic, about everything that was going on, that we chose not to do that because we thought that's what was best for the town. So in some regards, what we really have to look at is what additional expenses did we have last year? What additional expenses did we have because of the pandemic? And what additional expenses will we have in the next fiscal year, both to close structural deficits that we were carrying forward already, some of which were created from using our fund balance, largely at the request of many people in town, including some people in this committee, but people who are on this committee who aren't on it anymore. So these increases, the reason why we need to get to 33.9 is because of those things that happened, not just, structural deficits that were already there, special education costs that rose, that are, mandated to be met by statute. The fact that there was a structural deficit created by flat funding last year. And again, maybe the school committee should have chosen to put forward its own budget. Maybe we should have organized a petitioner's budget to sort of say, look, we've got COVID expenses, we've got the increases that are mandated by our contracts written 3 years ago. Maybe that would have been the more fiscally prudent thing to do, but we didn't, because we thought that's what was best for the town. So that's why we need to do some catch up this year. Thank you.
Denise Dimidaire has joined us.
Hi, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
I've been watching this, and I think it's very unfair the way that the town council has been portrayed. The casino money is not for the town council. And we are putting together a group that Mike Burke will be chairing. And some of this money will go to the school committee. Now, regardless of whether you believe or not, the theory that the casino money should be part of the general fund is mute right now. The town council, and if anyone watched that meeting, the casino money will be separated between the school committee and the town. There is no indication that the town is going to get this casino money. It was not out. If you watch that meeting, the town council decided that the casino money would be in a capital account for the school committee and the town council. And it's very unfair the way this is being portrayed. And I think it's a political way to portray this, and it's wrong. The casino money will be divided in whatever way this casino committee decides, but the school committee will get a part of this. The town council is now grabbing this money. It is not our intention to grab this money, and this is being portrayed wrong. And that's why I decided to come on here. Because if you watch the town council meeting, and whether you believe or not, we did it the right way, we have no intentions of spending that money just for the town. We are going to do it collaboratively with all the groups and decide where that money goes.
Diane.
Mr. Souza, can we wrap up the school committee's presentation?
Of course,
Yeah.
Diane does not agree with what I'm saying right now because
Well, I want to.
Wait a minute, Denise. I have
Everybody gets a chance to
never said that the town council was going to hold money from the schools. My question was, who is going to approve it? That was my only question. Now that the town council has control over the casino revenue, who will approve it?
the town
That's all.
council does not have control over the casino revenue.
But
We
you
are doing
do
this
by ordinance.
collaboratively. We are doing this with the opinion of the budget committee. We are doing this with the opinion of the school committee and the town council. And it will not be spent just the way the town council wants it to be spent. Please do not twist that, Diane.
Well, I think my point was that it should be done the way the charter prescribes.
And
And
Joe,
that
I understand
His
what
opinion
you're
is
saying.
debunked. But all right, look, this is not on the, really isn't, I think we're getting off the agenda as you always tell me, but I always want to let you speak So please finish, Denise, whatever you want to say.
Joe, I understand you disagree with us, but I think at the end, we're going to come to the same conclusion. I really do. The town council majority does not believe that the casino money needs to go just to the town. It needs to be shared. And that's what it's intended to do. We saw what happened this year. We did not get the amount we were supposed to get. And this is the most fiscally responsible way to do it. But the town council isn't going to grab this money. And I want to make that clear.
John?
Yeah, so sorry. There was a couple more accounts I wanted to ask some questions about.
Well, okay, we're still on the school committee, but I think they were ready to go. Let's be fast.
Apologize. 4 more. Account 55630 and account 55640. That's special ed tuition of private sources and special ed tuition education services agencies. When I look back at what we've spent, FY 20, 19, 18, those are massive jumps. Can you guys expand on that a little bit?
We have almost no control over it.
Like for some of the details, John, it's based on the number of students who require those services. So to Dr. Latkin's point, we don't have a control over that when it's mandated by an IEP. And the other interesting thing, unlike public schools, these schools can set their tuition basically at will on an annual basis. So they can move their tuition up 5, 6, 7, 8% annually, and we're left with paying that. So it's a combination of students, service, and the amount of the tuition.
We've actually asked our legislative delegation to try and sort of draft legislation that would limit the amounts that could be, the rises that could be made in any given year. And they were sympathetic. I'm not sort of faulting them for this, but there is really no good ability for them to do that. As far as I can tell. The other thing is that that whole funding mechanism would be best done on a state level because you can literally have 5 children who have very expensive IEPs move into town tomorrow. And by statute, we have to observe the IEPs. That is the appropriate thing to do for those children, but it can be extremely costly.
So when you say those private sources, is it like just any schools that you have to send them to, or how are those services dictated? Because I know that there's talk, and maybe you can help me understand this, because I know there's talk about that Newport County Special Education Collaborative, which Portsmouth left, and I'm trying to see if the reason for the jump has anything to do with Portsmouth bailing out of that organization.
That's not even that account, John.
Okay.
Portsmouth probably regrets having done that, but be that as it may, because they did not save the money that they thought they were going to save. But having said that, the evaluation is done, and then an IEP is written, and then it's the IEP that defines whether a child stays in district, is within the collaborative, but not necessarily in our district, or requires an outside institution, for want of a better word. That's not that's kind of a cold word, but a different school for which we have to pay the tuition. And the guiding principle is that a child has to be educated to the full extent that the child is able to be educated in the least restrictive environment. Thank you. Last 2 accounts I had questions on were 55803 and 55809, employee travel non-teachers, employee travel teachers. We're still in a pandemic. I'm just curious what travel we're paying for. When teachers are assigned to different schools, they get reimbursed from going to one school to the other at the what is it, the IRS or the Department of the Treasury? Somebody sets the rate. I forget exactly who. IRS. Yeah, it's like 55 cents a mile. Right. So is that encompassing non-teachers as well? I'd have to turn that over to Dr. Sanquioni or Ms. Roderick.
Yes. So the non-teachers also receive mileage.
So would that be like administration, or is that when you say non-teachers, like
So for example,
custodians?
some of the folks in our IT department, they travel
Okay.
from school to school to school. They get it, administrators, if they travel for school business. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Are we done? All right. I'm assuming that we're not going to vote tonight. We're going to get a chance to digest this and reconsider this at our next meeting. Is that acceptable to the committee or?
Yes,
Okay.
for me anyways.
And I want to thank Mr. Sanchoni and the school committee for coming out this evening or coming in this evening and giving us a good presentation and answering our questions because we had plenty.
So before we go, Mr. Susan, if I may,
Yes.
I want to make sure we leave you with, we threw around what the town's being asked of. I want to make sure you have that exact number. So it's exactly $27,206,476.
The town appropriation.
Yeah, we'll memorialize that in a letter to you, but just so
Yep.
you have that this evening. And I know on behalf of the school committee, and the administrators and all the teachers who work in Tiverton, we're looking to provide a high quality education. We took drastic cuts last year. We want to maintain what we do this year into next year. And that's what that 33.9 or the 27, if you want to break it down to the town portion, represent. Education is a civic responsibility. We've talked about other generations of people who live in Tiverton. And I would say to you that the education we're providing now is the same quality that it was in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s and the 60s. And every generation has stepped up and paid for that education for the people who attended the schools at that time. That's what we're asking you now. A civic responsibility in a democratic society. Everyone has to pay to make sure that these kids get a quality education. So I'll leave you with that, and I appreciate the time. I'll extend to you, if you should have any additional questions, please reach out to me and we'll get you an answer real quick.
Okay. Thank you.
Joe, if you're gonna take this up at another meeting.
Well, we didn't vote on the library and we haven't voted on, we're trying to wait as long as we can.
No, that's fine. I just,
Get the information from upstate to make sure. I know you already have a number though, but apparently, it's not firm until.
no, it's not. It's a projection. It's not.
That's what I'm saying. So we're trying to hold off as long as we can
All right.
to vote on final numbers. So,
Okay. I just, I'd be happy to have us be there at that night unless if there are other questions that come up in the
We'll
process.
send you an invite on, when we
that's
get ready to
before
do
we're
that
done.
and have you come back and hopefully you can bring us some really cheery news.
Yeah,
I'm not holding my breath though. Okay.
I won the lottery and I'm moving to California.
Powerball. Okay.
All right.
All right. We're going to move on then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Agenda item 7, the town administrator has came in and we have Denise in the house. And it was an update. Budget process, revenue, and new developments on state information received. So we're hoping that Chris and Denise maybe have some enlightenment for us this evening on new state numbers.
So the governor did come out with their budget in the last week and a half. The general aid for the town, when I say town, not disparaging the schools, it's what comes for non-school aid. FY 2021 came in at $1,200,542. FY 2022 is projected at $1,154,249. There's a differential of a negative $46,293. We haven't got the full breakdown as to exactly what that represents, but it's probably more in the line of motor vehicle taxes rebates on the phase out. On the school education aid in FY 2021, The state aid to education was $7,380,299. FY 2022 is projected at $6,774,565 for a differential of $605,734 as a negative number. So the state is giving us $605,000 less for education. So it's going to have an impact on the overall FY 2022 budget.
Yeah.
So in addition to that, and working with the league, the governor's office, some of our representatives, our delegation, there is also a bill that is being processed now through the legislature, which is a maintenance of effort that would permit all communities, because we're not the only one that received this cut. There are about 10 communities. I'm also asking for the state to justify the exact rationale for this cut, because it's not attributed to student population. It's not, they're telling us that we're wealthier, is basically what they told me. And it just doesn't fly to me that they have to be able to show me the calculations that were used to generate this, because I think it's totally unfair on behalf of the school system. You know, it's in light of the last 2 years of losing gaming revenues, and to add this as an insult to injury on top of it, for somehow to think that we can just make this up out of thin air. This is an 8% cut in state aid to education. We're allowed to tax by up to 4%. So I don't understand the rationale behind this. They're telling us that our statistical reval back in 2017 generated higher values, but they have yet to demonstrate to me the numbers that correlate to it. So we are trying to work our way through this, but there's a bill on the maintenance of effort issues that would allow us to go back to 2019 and fund it at 95% as a reduction in maintenance of effort, which, you know, believe me, the last thing I want to do is defund education. But these are really significant numbers for us to have to wrestle with. You know, and I didn't hear the presentation from the schools. As you saw, I did come on very late. I don't know what it is that they're asking for. I do remember that the school board sent a number of 32,500,000. There were some round numbers that went with that, but I don't know what the numbers that you're being asked to fund. So, you know, we're going to have some of our revenues did go up this year because we were extremely conservative on what we did.
Yeah.
And I would expect us to be in the same vein moving forward to FY 2022, to be in a conservative mode. It would be foolhardy for us to, you know, push forward projections of revenues with no basis for it. I mean, while we did have some positives this year, we also had some negatives. So they all balance out at the end of the day, but you know, we're not in very good shape, and our fund balance is okay, but for the fact that we froze spending on the town side of the budget for FY 2020. You know, that fund balance didn't get there by itself. It got there by not spending any money at all. From all of our capital expenses were frozen. And we've been pretty frugal in FY 2021 as well. We've been struggling to make ends meet. We're doing everything that we can to save money. And we're doing everything that we can to bring in additional revenues. We're working as hard as we can to bring the money home to be fair and equitable on all sides of the budget. And I agree with some of the comments that were made at the very end of the school's presentation. Believe me, they've got their job to do. We have ours to do as well too. I think that we've, you know, all of our managers have done a pretty phenomenal job of trying to do the best that they can with the little resources that they have. So that's it on the state side. There is better news. I did meet with Jack Reed today, Senator Reed, and his staff. I've met with on the phone with Representative Cicilline and Senator Whitehouse on the 1.9 trillion billion. I forgot. I can't even say the number anymore. It's so big. But on behalf of the schools, they will be getting an allocation of $1,788,000. It'll come in 2 tranches of money. It'll begin in May of this year. So they'll probably get 1/2 of that. There's another funding source that came in under President Trump when everybody got their $600 stimulus check. There was also a significant aid to education that the state of Rhode Island's RIDE department has been sitting on They've been trying to reformulate and recalculate how it's going to be distributed because nobody took into consideration the charter schools. So we don't know what Tiverton's going to be getting. And obviously these funds, hopefully, and I don't know what the guidance is on them yet, but I would hope that they would not be used to create structural deficits for future years, that maybe they can utilize them for some of the capital needs to rectify some of the issues that they have. And there's another fund that's coming on behalf of the community for the non-educational side in May. Again, this will be split into two segments, half this year, half next year. It's $1,555,000, I believe it is. And there's one other segment of money that's coming that is attributed to Newport County, and they have yet to tell us how much that's going to be and how we assume it's going to get distributed as a ratio of our populations. So, but I've yet to see the total number that's coming. That again is also being worked out through the Department of Justice, Department of Treasury, right now as to what that number is going to be. There is no guidance on any of these monies. They are expecting that we take care of some of our COVID issues that we've been dealing with. Some of our lost revenue items that we should be able to replace items that were no longer made whole. And talking with Jack Reed today, he was also very adamant that we should still be going after the state for our lost gaming money in addition to this, because they're getting $1 billion of lost revenue monies that is pretty much earmarked towards gaming as well. So we should get our representative share from the state. So I'll be talking to the council about what we should be doing with that. We should at least make an attempt to have a discussion with the state about it. So there's a number of funding sources coming forward. My gut feeling is on what the town will be doing with it. And it's just a gut feeling because the council will have to weigh in on this. Again, we would try to do things to move us forward without creating structural deficits. We can't use it to offset taxes. That's it. That's one of the first and foremost. There's two things they pretty much predominantly said you cannot do. You can't use it to offset your tax rate, and you can't use it to fund pensions. So that tells me that we shouldn't be doing any additional staffing, or we shouldn't be giving people raises or anything that goes with your day-to-day operations. It should be going towards your one-time expenditures, or you're building out your infrastructure, whether it be like we should do our recycling center. We should do whatever we need to do for some of our IT infrastructure that we've never had money to do. But again, I'll discuss all this when we get guidance from the Treasury and put it in front of the council and let them weigh in as to exactly how they're the body that is the ultimate sayer is how this is going to be utilized. Very similar that the 1.7 million and whatever else they're getting from the Trump stimulus on the education side, the school board will be the ultimate sayer on how that gets utilized in accordance with their guidance. So there are monies that are coming that, it's a good thing, but it's also, we have to spend it wisely. And I think the council and will be very astute at trying to follow the guidance to the best that we can once that guidance comes out. Right now, there's nothing for us, that guidance is not going to come until May 9th. That's the earliest that the Treasury will put it out. They've got their hands full on trying to craft exactly how these monies should be spent. And I've had a long conversation with Senator Whitehouse's staff and Representative Cicilline's staff about that today, about the need to make sure that they give us appropriate guidance so that we can follow the roadmap to get it done and do it properly, so that we're not embarrassed at all later on how we spent this money.
Chris, yes, what was the term projects when they gave money in the past? There were projects that were already in the works.
Shovel ready?
Shovel ready. Is it going to be, you think the stimulus, should we prepare, you know what I mean, have our ducks in line for that money so that in case it comes in with that shovel ready?
So this money, from what we heard today, does not have to be spent until FY 2024. So there is some time. It's not like it has to be spent immediately. It will have to be spent.
Yeah.
But I do believe the council will, in all likelihood, at least I would hope that they would, set up a review committee and set up a, some sort of capital projects committee and stimulus committee, to joint, the whole thing, and try to formulate exactly where they believe these funds would best suit the community.
So it won't be based on like which communities have those projects already.
No,
It's just
every
based on by population.
every community is getting money.
Okay. All right.
So it's a lot. Some communities are getting far much more money than we are, believe me.
No, I believe it.
I'm not begrudging anybody to get any of this money. I just think that, this is a prime opportunity for us to spend this appropriately so that we can fix some of the things that we have. And I don't want to say neglect, because it's very hard to say you're neglecting something when you don't have any money to spend. So, there are priorities that many of you know. I've been out of this community from 2014 to 2020. So there are things that have been lurking that I don't have any clue on that what we should be doing. I do know that we have a capital projects book. John actually dropped it off at my office once. I've yet to go through it all, to find out where the priorities are. And it's something we need to do to make sure that we use this money properly so that we set the goals for the taxpayers, that we are not coming after them to create some sort of structural payments later on after we're done. So that's just my view of it, but I'm hoping the council feels the same way with it. John?
So I have a question for you, Mr. Administrator. So when we were talking at the beginning of the school committee's presentation, not knowing about this 1.7 that's coming and this unknown dollars from the former administration, but doing quick math, it looked like total increase where we were today was going to be somewhere around 6.38%, which would obviously be above the 4% cap if we were to move forward and fully fund their request as well as, or their budget as well as, what we've already looked at on the municipal side. Is the town council going to take up and at least prepare, to put us in a position if we were to go over the 4% cap, to go to the delegation and file whatever is required to be able to break that 4% cap in the event that we need it?
So it's not a movement that goes to the delegation, and I'm assuming you mean our representatives and senators from the state. It is a process where the town council president, and I believe there may not need to be a vote, but I'm assuming there would be a vote of the council, that the council is agreeable to go over the 4% and is asking the State Office of Municipal Finance to look at the rationale to get over the 4% cap. The state, in all actuality, can decline to allow us to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a big lift to ask the taxpayers to go over 4% if the law says you can't go over it. I mean, and it's just creating a larger structural issue to deal with later on. So, that's a huge lift to ask the council president to do. I mean, I think we did it once back in 2007 or 2008 on the very first series of bonds that, full bonds that came through on the construction of the 3 schools. We had to do that. And I think that's the only time I remember this town ever doing that. So we justified it by the massive capital infrastructure that we had built and the new debt service that came on, that there just wasn't any way to support it other than through an increase in taxes.
Denise, go ahead, Denise. I think you're muted.
You're muted, Denise.
I know what Chris is saying, but I think we're past the deadline to go over the 4%. I think there's a deadline. No, Chris?
Because we pushed the FTR till July, it has to be submitted before the financial town hearing, whatever date we have set in that schedule of dates.
You're right. You're right.
I want to say it has to be done like 20 days before the hearing.
All right.
So we'll have to get the deadlines and as to when that's going to come. But when you ask for that increase to go over 4%, you're going to have a pretty good rationale as to why it needs to go. And for them to actually take on it. If I remember right, it was I don't know what the guidance is now. I'd have to go look at the law, but it used to be like debt service issues.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
It's
more debt.
huge.
There was some emergency issue that created, whether it was a roof coming off or something, or there were criteria on how to make that to get over 4% for the Department of Municipal Finance to actually even take a look at it.
Yeah, just for the record, I can't support going over 4%.
We agree on that.
Listen, we're all on the same
I
page
would
here.
never support going over 4%.
It was just for discussion purposes.
I asked
So,
the
Joe,
question.
you and I actually agree on something, okay?
Believe it or not, we agree on a lot of stuff. It's just certain things we don't agree on.
No,
In
I
general, we
think
agree on a
we
lot.
need to sharpen our pencils and we need to figure this out. I'll tell you, the town council has tried to do the best we can, and we have another meeting April 10th, and we're going to look at our budget again, and we're going to look at to see what else we can do. But going over the 4%, I will never support that, and I will tell you that right now.
Just for an FYI, I'm looking at, we're at about 14% right now.
Yeah, I would never support it. We need to get ourselves together and decide what our priorities are and what this town needs. And I'm not talking just the town council priorities, also the school priorities.
I get it.
But we need to decide what we need to spend, but over 4%, I will never support. I think that we can do this. And I think the council has put a great effort into it. And I think we took a lot of our capital and we spent it out of our capital reserve. And I think we've made an effort, but going over the 4% to me is absurd and I won't support it. So that's where I stand. So we have
Thank you.
to
It just,
decide. We have to,
Mr. Haley, you said we're at 14% right now increase.
are you serious?
You know, there's lots of uncertainty in that, but right. Because the only numbers that have changed were what Chris just supplied on the revenue side.
So
I
another
think
factor
what
is
the
the
town,
And the school went up from what
I
we.
think what the town council, and I think my priority, the April 10th meeting, is see what the town council budget is going to increase the budget by. And I think the town council needs to decide what our goal is. And that's all we can do. But I have to tell you, we are looking for pennies under cushions to get through what we need to get through. And I think we're being very responsible. And I think that we will look at everything we approved and we'll cut what we feel is necessary. But we're doing the best we can. But going over the 4% is unacceptable.
Almost feel like cutting capital is unacceptable every year.
Well, Joe, we did the best we could because we took
I
capital
know.
reserve and look at what we decided to spend it on.
Well,
And I think we have helped the taxpayers because we're not taxing them for this capital. So I think the town council is doing the due diligence and we'll look at it again and we're getting more money back from the police cars and maybe we can pull a little bit more out of our capital. And then we're going to look at every single line item again and see what we can cut. But we're doing the best we can. And with Chris's guidance, he's been doing an exceptional job with us. And we're going to do the best we can, but we can't take from safety. We cannot take from, there's more to all of this than just the schools. It's safety, it's ambulances that are able to go and get sick people, it's fire engines that are able to put out fires. I mean, there's more to a town than just one thing. And we can all come together and I think we can do it, but we all have to be cooperative.
It's a tough balance. It really is.
It is. And believe it or not, you all know it. I was on the school committee side. So I know what it's like over there and it's really tough over there. And you have to try to do the best you can for the kids, but we're all a town. And I think we need to get together and decide what we need to spend and how we can save.
Well, is there anything else?
I believe that's it, as far as like the revenue side of the things that were totally unknown. I will say that the assessor is trying to get to the point where they are wrapping up the final valuation through the reval. There is the whole hearing process that goes through with those who want to dispute. So that's another piece of the puzzle that, is going to be hopefully very helpful in trying to, push this piece together. As far as putting the, because we still have pieces of this puzzle missing. So, and we are still working out some of our revenue items that we are, we've done a pretty good, and I don't think I've gotten them to you, and working with the treasurer's office and all the town departments as far as where we believe, based on, expectations of today, where we're going to be so that we can project for next year. So we're trying to get you as most of the updated information that we can, and we'll hopefully have all that for you for the next meetings.
It's probably a question for Dave, but do you know if the assessment on the power plant was finally completed?
So we're at the final stages. I don't have and it's the piece I'm waiting on, is the very final assessment that was done by the valuation company that we had come out and take a look at it. That I don't know. I don't know the number right now, and it still needs to, before I would even say anything, actually, the town council needs to weigh in on this as to whether or not they would like to do the power plant as a straight valuation as a property, or would we consider going to a payment in lieu of taxes to have a steady income? Because believe it or not, even if the power plant went up in value, next year it could go down. So, and it could, they can spike up and down periodically, and it would have a detrimental. That's what the reason why they did it, the 10-year with the 10-year renewal originally, was to mitigate that spiking of that value, because it affects every homeowner when it does spike and it goes down. Everybody else has to pick up what's not there. So it's a discussion that the council needs to have with myself, the lawyer, and the power plant as to where the council wants to be with this. It's not a decision that's going to be made in the next week or two. It's going to be something that'll be done before the budgetary season is done, I hope. But there's information that the council needs to take a look at before. That's, like I said, it's another piece of the puzzle that's missing right now.
Denise.
As you can tell, Chris just told you a bunch of things we need to weigh in on. And I will tell you that the council will weigh in on it, and we'll do all we can to be able to find some relief. And we will work on it as long as we have to. But I know my town council is dedicated to make sure that all this works out. And we do the best for the school committee. We do the best for the citizens. And there's a lot that we have on our plate, but we'll do it, and we'll try to do what's best.
Anybody else? Are we all set?
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Number 8, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Assume we have unanimous consent. And we're saying goodnight. Thank you, Chris and Denise.